boy stood frozen in the middle of the executive conference room, a cheap paper folder clutched tightly in his small hands. Around him, tall glass walls, 10 expensive suits, and one man with a Rolex tapping the table impatiently. "You think this is a charity show?" the man scoffed, without even looking at the boy. "Tell your mom to keep you out of grown-up spaces. This isn't the janitor's lounge." Silence. The boy blinked once, his jaw tensed, and then a sound behind the glass, a soft squeak, rubber soles, cleaning gloves pressed against the window. The man turned, half annoyed, half amused. What now? But when the janitor stepped into the room, everything stopped. She didn't speak. She didn't even raise her voice. She just walked in, like she belonged. And in her hand, a file, thick, marked confidential. Everyone stared, except her son. He knew. If you've ever been underestimated just because of your job, this story will hit hard. Don't scroll, drop a comment. Who do you think had the real power in that room? And subscribe. Because this story, it's just getting started. 7:42 a.m. School cafeteria. One carton of milk, still warm from the delivery crate, sat on a scratched plastic tray. Malik picked it up carefully with both hands. Not for himself, he already had his breakfast. This one was for Thomas, a kid in his class who always sat alone, always too shy to go through the lunch line. Malik had seen him the day before, pretending to sip from an empty cup. So this morning, he brought 2 milks. One for him, one for Thomas. No big speech. No, look at me. He just dropped it in front of him and nodded. You forgot yours. Thomas blinked, then looked down. Thanks. From across the room, someone watched. Someone in a crisp navy suit, loafers that had never seen a sidewalk, and a face that didn't know how to smile unless cameras were involved. Julian Kramer, billionaire, founder, investor. His son Dylan was in Malik's class and seated 2 tables away, already frowning. Julian walked over slowly. Too slowly. That kind of slow that makes people notice, and stop chewing. He didn't speak to Malik. He didn't speak to Thomas. He looked straight at the milk and said, "Son, if you're giving food away, maybe you should check with your mom first. Pretty sure they don't pay janitors enough to sponsor other kids." The entire table froze. A fork clinked onto the tray. Someone coughed. Malik stood there, one hand still on the carton. His face stayed still, but his ears turned red. A few kids giggled. Thomas looked like he wanted to disappear. Julian just raised an eyebrow like he was giving a lesson. Then, a soft squeak from the floor. A mop trailing water near the vending machines. And there she was. Danielle, Malik's mom, wearing her standard gray uniform, her hair tucked back, and a cleaning belt strapped around her waist. She was wiping a spill, back turned. But she heard every word. She didn't flinch. She didn't confront him. She didn't speak. Just 1 second of pause. And then she went back to scrubbing. The message was clear. Not today. But her silence? It said more than 1,000 words. Malik grabbed his tray, turned toward his mom, eyes locking for half a second, and walked out of the cafeteria without a sound. The bell rang. Later that day, in homeroom, the news spread. Malik had been disqualified from the upcoming innovation fair. No explanation, just an email to his mom's phone. Not selected due to entry concerns. His project? A self-watering plant system, built from scraps he found while she cleaned classrooms. He'd worked on it for 3 weeks, after hours, in the janitor's closet, with her. Danielle checked the email twice, then once more. The sender? Kendra Rowe, head of the parent committee, Dylan's mom and Julian's wife. That night, Malik didn't say a word. He sat at the kitchen table staring at the circuit board he had disassembled. Wires everywhere. It looked like wreckage. Danielle cooked his favorite, baked macaroni, but he didn't touch it. "I just wanted to help," he said finally. Danielle sat across from him, folded her hands, and said nothing. Because this wasn't about milk. It wasn't even about the project. It was about how quickly people decided who mattered and who didn't. But Danielle? She was paying attention now. She started asking quiet questions. She reviewed the Innovation Fair Committee list. She remembered which rooms she was suddenly reassigned away from. She noticed a meeting scheduled late, in a room she usually cleaned, a room she now wasn't allowed near. And so the next morning, she did something she hadn't done in over a year. She ignored the schedule. She walked straight to conference room B, the glass-walled chamber where decisions were made, and cleaned it, slowly, quietly, while the committee gathered, and what she overheard that day changed everything. Conference room B always smelled like lemon cleaner and fake authority. Big windows, big chairs, big voices. Danielle had cleaned that room more times than she could count. But today she wasn't there to clean. She stood just outside, mop in hand like a prop, pretending to scan her clipboard. Inside, the parent committee meeting was already in full swing. She could hear every word through the half-open door. "We can't afford to let just anyone represent the school," a woman said crisply. Danielle recognized the voice. Kendra Rowe, pearl necklace, passive-aggressive smile. Julian's wife. "I'm just saying," Kendra continued, "we're positioning the Innovation Fair as a showcase of excellence. Optics matter, sponsors are watching." Malik's project was, someone tried to say. "Built in a janitor's closet," Julian cut in. "That's not the image we want. No offense to the help." Soft laughter echoed. Danielle stared through the glass. They were sipping coffee out of branded mugs. One of them had propped a $3,000 handbag on a chair like it needed a seat too. She watched as her son's name was crossed off a list on the projector screen, replaced by Dylan Kramer, Eco Banking App, prototype pending. Danielle's fingers tightened around the clipboard. And that's when someone inside said, "Should we be worried about the mother? She's always lurking around." Kendra laughed. "What's she gonna do? Mop at us?" More laughter. Danielle took one long breath through her nose. Then, calmly, she stepped back into the hallway, flipped open the clipboard, and jotted down two things. Malik removed from list. Julian manipulated roster vote. Not rage, not revenge. Documentation. Because Danielle was done being invisible. That night, she stayed up late. In their small apartment above the laundromat, Malik was asleep, tangled in his sheets. Danielle sat at the kitchen counter with her old laptop, the one she hadn't opened since her graduate program. She opened a folder titled Observations. Inside, a spreadsheet with names, dates, offhand remarks. She'd been keeping it for years, at first just to stay sane. Now, it looked a lot like a map of how the system works, who moves the pieces, who gets silenced, who never even gets seen. She added a new entry. Innovation Fair, 7 a.m. Main event prep, high PR presence. Then she looked at her son's broken project, and an idea began to form. The next morning, Danielle did her rounds like usual. Mop, spray, smile at teachers who didn't know her name. But when she got to the back storage room, she pulled out two things. Her old university ID, a sealed envelope. She slipped the envelope into her back pocket, exhaled once, and headed straight for the administration office. "Hi," she said to the secretary with a calm she didn't feel. "I think I'm supposed to deliver this to Mr. Adams?" She held up the envelope, smile tight. The secretary glanced at the uniform, then back to the envelope. Her expression wavered. Sure, you can leave it." "I was told to hand it to him directly," Danielle interrupted, polite but firm. "It's confidential." The secretary hesitated, but power speaks in confidence, and Danielle's tone had changed. Less cleaning lady, more internal affairs. The door buzzed open. She walked inside and handed the envelope to Principal Adams, nodded once, and walked out. She never looked back. Inside that envelope? Audio transcripts from the parent committee meeting. A timeline of Malik's removal. A formal request to review the voting process. And one final sheet, a resignation letter. From the school's head custodian. Except Danielle hadn't written it. She just found it. The real custodian had quit 3 weeks earlier. Danielle? She was still a temp, meaning she wasn't even on payroll the day she overheard the meeting, and that made the recording perfectly legal. That afternoon, whispers started. Principal Adams held a closed-door meeting. Julian and Kendra were seen walking out with tight jaws. And Malik? He got an unexpected email. "Your project has been reinstated. We look forward to seeing your work on display." He stared at the screen in disbelief. Danielle just said, might want to fix those loose wires tonight. But the real showdown, it hadn't even started yet. Because the Innovation Fair wasn't just a school event this year, Julie and Kramer had arranged something bigger. A full board presentation, live, parents, press, donors, and it would take place in Conference Room B, right where it all began. Everything's about to collide and someone's reputation won't survive it. There were muffins on the table, lemon poppy seed, artisan baked, one for each donor. Every chair had a printed name tag. Every screen displayed the school's new slogan, "Excellence starts early." But for Malik, standing in the doorway of Conference Room B, it didn't feel like excellence. It felt like war. He was dressed in his best clothes. A navy button-down, slightly too big, sleeves rolled just above his wrists. His hair was neat. His shoes were scuffed. Julian Kramer leaned against the table like he owned the air. Dylan sat beside him, already bored. Principal Adams nodded politely but kept glancing at his phone. Malik stepped in. Alone. "Is this where I set up?" he asked, eyes scanning the room. Kendra Rowe turned slightly. "Yes, just over there, near the glass." "Of course, the corner, the edge, where no one would look unless he caused a fire." Malik didn't flinch. He rolled his little suitcase over, set his project on the table, and began assembling the pieces. An upside-down soda bottle, tubes, moisture sensors, solar battery pack made from calculator scraps. Across the room, Julian whispered something to a woman in a red blazer. She laughed politely. Malik's hands were shaking. Out in the hallway, Danielle waited. No mop, no gloves. Just her uniform and a clipboard, the armor of her profession. She stood across from the room, leaning casually against the wall. People walked past without looking. Staff, parents, donors. To them, she was part of the background. Noise, furniture, perfect. Back inside, the event began. Julian stepped up first. He flashed a confident smile. His slide deck opened with motion graphics. "Eco-banking, the future of Gen Z finance," the screen read. No prototype, no code, just a concept. Applause anyway. Then Dylan was introduced, all awkward shoulders and memorized lines. More polite claps. Malik was next. He walked up without a microphone, no slides, just his hands. "This is a zero-cost irrigation system," he said. "It waters plants by sensing soil dryness. I made it from junk." A pause. He glanced toward the hallway. Danielle was still there, watching. Someone coughed. "Press this button," Malik said, "and the plant waters itself." Click. Water bubbled through the pipe. Soil darkened. Silence. And then, "Neat trick," Julian said from his chair. "But what does it teach? How to dumpster dive?" Malik blinked, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, and that's when it happened. The glove. A yellow latex glove tapped gently on the glass wall behind the donor's table. Tap. Tap. Julian turned, annoyed. Danielle was standing outside the conference room. She raised one eyebrow, then slowly opened the door, walked in, and said nothing. "Ma'am, this is a private event," Principal Adams started, but she walked straight past him, to the projector, held up a flash drive. "Permission to present," she said flatly. Everyone blinked. Principal Adams hesitated, but the air in the room had shifted. He stepped aside. Danielle plugged in the drive, and the screen lit up. Slide 1, a chart. Title: Structural Bias and Academic Opportunity Allocation. Below, data, real names blurred, emails, decisions, dates. Slide 2, audio waveforms. "Mop at us," the text read. KR, Parent Committee, 7:12 a.m. Slide 3, School Policy Handbook. A highlighted clause: No committee member may influence finalist selection. The room was silent. Julian stood slowly. "This is absurd. She's just a janitor." Danielle turned, locked eyes. "I was," she said, "before your wife had me reassigned for standing too close to your son's project." Gasps. She reached into her bag, pulled out a file, and tossed it on the table. Her resume: former data analyst, master's degree, unfinished due to single parenthood. 4 published research papers on institutional bias. "I clean your floors," she said. "Not because I have to, because I chose to stay where my son needed me." Julian scoffed. So this is a stunt? You come in here, humiliate my family in front of donors? Danielle walked to Malik's project, took a long breath. This? This is the only real project in this room. Built by hand, with zero budget, tested, functional, it works. She touched her son's shoulder, and all you saw was the mop. Julian moved to speak again, but was interrupted by applause. Not polite claps, real ones, from donors, from teachers, even from Principal Adams. One of the sponsors, a woman in a burgundy suit, stood. Ms. Danielle Booker, she said. Ms. Booker, would you consider joining our STEM Equity Advisory Board? We could use your insight. Danielle smiled, slow and sharp. We'll talk. And Malik? He didn't say a word. He just looked at the man who humiliated him, then at the mother who walked through fire to put him back in that room. And he clicked his project again. Water bubbled. Life flowed. Danielle never raised her voice, never slammed a fist, never once said, I told you so. She didn't have to. The file she dropped on that table spoke louder than any mic ever could. It landed like a brick on a glass floor. Cracks started forming in every direction. And Julian Kramer? He stood there, blinking, as the air shifted around him. His face didn't move, but his eyes did. Rapid. Searching. For control. For escape. For someone to remind the room he was still the billionaire in charge. But no one came. Because Danielle wasn't just a janitor anymore. She had receipts. She had context. She had the ledger. It started 3 years earlier. Danielle had been passed over for a data coordinator job in the school district. Despite a perfect test score, despite recommendations. They told her she didn't fit the culture. She was cleaning classrooms 2 weeks later, but instead of deleting her spreadsheets, she renamed them. Lunchroom budget flow? After-school funding discrepancy. Parent committee interference log. She never intended to use it. She just couldn't stop seeing it. Patterns, loopholes, power lines. And eventually she realized, no one notices the janitor taking notes. Back in conference room B, the meeting had devolved into polite chaos. A donor excused herself to check on something. Another quietly asked to be sent the slides. One teacher slipped Danielle a note. I've seen this too. Thank you. Julian tried to laugh. Tense room, he muttered. Then, to everyone's shock, he turned to Danielle and said, You think this little protest makes you look smart? You think embarrassing me changes anything? My son's project has real potential. Your kid recycles bottles. Danielle didn't flinch. She turned to Principal Adams. Would you like to see the full report? He paused, then nodded. Danielle reached into her bag, took out a small dog-eared notebook. Not a laptop, not a tablet, a paper ledger, handwritten, dated, color-coded. She placed it on the table and opened it, flipped slowly through pages marked conflict of interest, suspicious vote clusters, and resource reallocation. She didn't say a word, because the words were already there. Meanwhile, Malik stood off to the side. He didn't understand everything. He didn't know what discretionary budgets or vendor kickbacks meant, but he understood one thing. His mom was dangerous. Not the kind of dangerous that hurts people. The kind that sees too much. The kind they tried to ignore, until she made ignoring her a liability. An hour later, the meeting adjourned. Kendra Rowe didn't look anyone in the eye. She picked up her bag and left without a word. Julian stayed behind, frozen, sweating. A final question hovered in the air. Do you have anything you want to say? Principal Adams asked him quietly. Julian looked at Malik, then at Danielle, then at the notebook. No, he said, voice hoarse. Not right now. That night, Danielle and Malik walked home in silence. Not the heavy kind, the kind filled with aftershocks. The kind where you know something just broke loose, but you're not ready to name it yet. At the corner bodega, Danielle bought him a new notebook. Write your ideas down, she said, every single one. Even the dumb ones? He asked. Especially the dumb ones, she smirked. Those are the ones they never see coming. The next morning, Danielle found an envelope taped to her locker. No name, no sender. Inside, a letterhead from the school board. Request for proposal, Equity and Access Specialist. A short note scribbled at the bottom. We'd like you to apply, if you're interested. We've already seen your work. She didn't smile. She folded the letter, slipped it into her back pocket, and picked up her mop, because she wasn't done yet. The boardroom wasn't built for people like Danielle. It sat 12, all with identical chairs. Padded leather, chrome arms, ergonomic curves that whispered money. The windows looked out over the city skyline, the kind of view meant to impress, to remind anyone sitting in that room. You're lucky to be here. Danielle wasn't lucky. She was invited, reluctantly, nervously, because when someone who used to mop the floors gets a seat at the decision-making table, people get quiet and afraid. Not of her past, but of what she might remember. 3 weeks after the innovation fair, the school board asked Danielle to advise informally at a planning meeting. Translation: we want your insight, but we don't want to give you power. She showed up anyway, in her uniform, on purpose, because she wanted them uncomfortable. Principal Adams was the first to greet her. This time he stood when she entered. Danielle, thank you for coming, he said, voice tight. Please, sit anywhere. She chose the seat at the far end. Not the head, not the side, the one by the projector. I brought some notes, she said, placing her ledger on the table like a stone tablet. The room tensed. Julian Kramer wasn't there. Word was he'd stepped down from 2 committees and was exploring other opportunities. But Kendra? She was seated on the left, pretending to type on her iPad. Before we begin, Danielle said calmly, I just want to clarify something. Everyone looked up. I'm not here as a token. I'm not here to be your conscience. I'm here because you needed someone who sees the cracks from the floor level. Silence. Then someone near the middle, a younger board member, coughed and said, Absolutely. That's why we wanted your voice. Danielle raised an eyebrow. You didn't want my voice, she said. You wanted the version of me that stays quiet after giving you the uncomfortable data. Eyes shifted, postures stiffened. Then she opened her notebook. For the next 30 minutes, she walked them through her plan. A review process for all student program selections, anonymized and bias audited. A grievance channel for students to report unfair treatment, not routed through parent committees. Paid mentorship opportunities for working-class parents to advise curriculum decisions. Resource equity mapping, based on what kids actually use, not what looks good on paper. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. She just laid it out, clean, surgical, undeniable. One older board member, a man in a beige suit with perfect hair, finally leaned back. This is ambitious, he said, but some of these measures imply the current system is fundamentally broken. Danielle met his eyes. It is. Another pause. Well, with time and proper coordination, maybe we could implement some... No, she cut in. You don't phase in fairness. You choose it. Outside the room, Malik waited in the lobby, sketching circuits in a spiral notebook. He didn't know what was happening inside, but he knew what his mom looked like when she wasn't backing down. At the end of the meeting, Principal Adams stood again. We'll review your proposal formally, he said. There's a budget meeting next week. We'd like you to attend as an equal. Danielle stood, gathered her notebook. Send me the agenda. Then paused. And take my name off the custodial roster. He nodded. As she left the building, Malik looked up from his seat. How'd it go? He asked. She smiled. I didn't spill a drop. Epilogue. 6 months later, a new sign hangs outside the school entrance. Equity in Action Lab, powered by community. Inside, a wall features student inventions made from recycled parts. Malik's irrigation system sits in a clear case, still running. A plaque beneath it reads, Built with hands that saw value in the overlooked. Malik Booker, grade 7. Danielle walks the halls now in a different outfit. Not a suit, not a uniform. Just clothes that let her move. Students nod at her. Teachers ask for her insight. Parents watch her carefully, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Because now everyone knows. She's not just the janitor. She's the woman who knew where all the floors were weak and chose to build better ones.